Johnson of ours. Oh, okay, recording now.
Perfect timing. Sorry.
Yeah, that Kurt Johnson leads up, and so he is when we get talking about the legislation that's underway, he's the main staff person that's helping to shepherd that legislation through the legislature. So this is just an overview of what I'm going to talk about. What is a virtual power plant? Where have they been implemented? Not too many places. How are they important for climate resilience and climate pollution, which also relates to health implications? What are some of the challenges and a call to action? And I don't think I put in here that we're also going to talk about legislation, and there might be a few other slides that aren't necessarily in this overview, but I think we can go to the next slide. So, what is a virtual power plant? So, the concept of a virtual power plant evolves because we now have a lot more electrification going on, getting away from fossil gas and going to things like electric, heat pump water heaters, HVAC systems, smart thermostats, inductive cooktops, electric vehicles, all these kind of things that are electricity. And the concept here is that and then there's all kinds of other places where you've got electrical entities, right? Like solar systems, battery energy storage systems, wind farms, all these other things that are sort of on this diagram here. And because we have the computer technology, the smarts, you overlay smarts on this, meaning the computers, and in that central thing there, that cloud, the thing that's sort of in the shape of a cloud with three things that I'm imagining are supposed to be, computer hard drives, right? Is it's basically a control center. I think the image I would put in there more is a person at a computer screen that can control, meaning throttle up or throttle down uh, energy at these sites with pre-arrangements with them. So say just you, like say your utility reaches out to you and says, hey, we'd like to be able to use 5% of the charge that in your electric vehicle that is parked in your garage. You'd still have 95%, and hey, you could get to the market with 95% of your charge, and you would get compensated for that. So it's a money arrangement, it's a energy transfer arrangement, and it's something that allows a number of things, which we'll get to. It allows for management of the grid, and importantly, it allows for beginning to look at not building in the first place fossil gas peaker plants, and or not firing them up. Like we have these things called there are gas plants that just sit there waiting for the peak load episodes, when there's high demand on the electricity grid, and we fire up fossil power plants. How about instead we use a virtual power plant to reduce the demand and or increase the generation of some of the resources that are out there. So I hope that helped describe what we're talking about here. It's a virtual power plant, meaning you're not actually building a single entity like any one of those buildings that they show there. You're not doing that. You're using existing resources out there in the world, and you are communicating with them, networking with them, and controlling them from a single location. Okay, next slide. So where are they being implemented? It's the CCAs, community choice aggregation programs that are taking a lead. They have MCE is the community choice agency that started out in Marin County. I think it's now 4 counties, Napa, Contra Costa. Um, and they have a virtual power plant project getting going in Richmond, California. And so there's a hyperlink. By the way, there's hyperlinks to things in here. And this deck, Ashley, let's be sure to share it out because there are
Yeah,
hyperlinks in the
yeah,
deck
yeah.
that
I
people
will.
can click on and learn about the MCEs. And they've developed something that's super important for doing anything innovative or anything new in the electrical world. you need to develop, they call it a tariff. I think a better term for it is rate structure. So MCE has also developed a rate structure specifically for virtual power plants. And that's something really cool that a CCA can do where they don't need the approval from the California Public Utilities Commission. So they've developed their own tariff. They're using it, and they've got this project going in Richmond, California. Ava Community Energy, that's the East Bay CCA. They also have a virtual power plant initiative. They are hoping to have some third-party players work with them to develop a virtual power plant. To my knowledge, there's no virtual power plant up and running there yet. And then in Vermont, in Michigan, in several other states around the country, in other parts of California, there are baby steps being taken. The big utilities are also looking at this. It's a lot more difficult for big utilities in some ways to do things like this because they do need approval from the California Public Utilities Commission for any projects and programs that they want to implement, and they're required by law to implement whatever they implement, for all of their service territories. So it's a large service territories, and they have to, treat all of their what are called ratepayers, customers, equally. Next slide. Yeah, and so for climate resilience and climate pollution, I think that the first thing to say is that there's a huge evolution underway with the electricity sector, which is a move away from the old 100-year plus old electricity system where we have big power plants, big transmission lines, and ratepayers who don't ask too many questions to just pay your bills, right? That's been what it's been for the last 100 years. And that is changing. It is changing because of the technologies. It's changing because of some of the social dynamics and because of the climate imperative. And we're moving toward decentralization where we've got things like solar and wind, and battery storage and electric vehicles and other resources that allow us to get away from big power plants and to move toward a decentralized system. And decentralization inherently helps with resilience. Just think about whack-a-mole, right? This a system that's decentralized that includes multiple diverse and redundant resources is much less vulnerable to cataclysmic kind of, like massive blackouts that we've had. There's historic blackouts that have occurred, and no one likes a blackout, and they're dangerous, and people die in blackouts. Um, and also things like threats from things like maybe vandalism or terrorist type activities where they can knock out a single power plant or substation and really cause a lot of disruption. So there's inherent stability in that, and there's so inherent resilience for making it through extreme weather events, heat events, maybe storms, floods, whatever, a greater ability. And we've seen that. There are examples going all the way back, maybe before the 2012 Superstorm Sandy, they called it, on the East Coast. Some of the places that never lost power were places where there were early microgrids or early decentralized systems that were in place, and they never lost power, or they were the first to come back up. Why? Because there's more sensors and there's more ability for them to be nimble and get their power back up and running. We have case studies from here in Sonoma County in the Tubbs fire in 2017. A microgrid at a working farm never lost power through,
Oh,
everyone lost power. A microgrid in Sonoma Valley never lost power because why? Because they're islandable and they were able to keep going. Anyway, so there's inherent stability in this sort of decentralization and multiple diverse and redundant resources. And then for climate pollution and why the climate center, I mean, we're interested in it because we're interested in justice and resilience and all these other issues. But climate pollution in particular, again, as I said a bit earlier, once you really start getting some adoption of these kinds of technology, virtual power plants that are all electricity based, you get away from fossil gas and you get away from climate pollution. So that's it in a nutshell. Um, so I think we can go to the next slide.
Can I, two things. So just to underline that, Woody, that there's, did you tell me when we were prepping for this, how many natural gas peaker plants are there in the state, roughly?
I don't know. A
A
lot.
lot?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head.
But we can potentially avoid them turning on if we if there's more like clean storage through the virtual power plants.
It's not yes, and it's storage. Yes. I mean, there's batteries now more and more all the time. I mean, the curve of battery adoption is just, it's a J curve. Um, and the more electric vehicles we have, and there are supposed to be like 7 or 8 million in California by 2030, there's already a critical mass of electric vehicles that you can tap into that power for what we call capacity, which means and this is especially with bi-directional EVs that can both store, be charged up, but it can also transfer their power back to the grid. Most auto manufacturers are heading in that direction. Um, and so it's the ability to instead here's the concept to understand. For 100 years, the electricity system and power generators, the whole game has been meet the demand. There's been nothing other than these sort of programs like Flex Your Power, where they ask you to run to your house and turn the thermostat down, because we're experiencing a summer heat wave or something. That's Looney Tunes. That's old. That's like 20th century stuff. We need automated systems that do all of that stuff automatically and reduce load. You know, industries. Part of the reason the industries were noted on that diagram I showed earlier is that they don't always need to operate at full. They don't always need to operate fully. So, say a industrial site, the one up there at the top, they can be asked and be compensated for curtailing their operations at a given time, right? And that can all be automated. And some of that stuff is happening. But when you combine it with all these other things, then you can really get some significant ability to not just put power on the grid from resources that are generating, but reducing. So it's called demand flexibility, having some demand flexibility and flipping that 100-year system of just meet the demand to, hey, you can now start playing with the demand and managing the demand in a far better way. Okay, so
Got
now we
it.
can go back to, did that answer your
Yeah,
question?
definitely. And I think there was one other question to just weave in right now. So Jody asked if there are other battery storage companies that offer VPPs like Tesla does.
Yes, there are quite a number of battery manufacturers, battery companies that are very interested in making this happen. And so the answer to that is a resounding yes. Tesla is definitely not the only one.
And Woody
Uh,
has some resources. Maybe we could come back to that if you want, Jody, at the end.
yeah, and anything that comes up, if there's a need to follow up with some resources, I have a lot of stuff at my fingertips. Obviously, didn't include everything here, and there's stuff that I just have at my fingertips that if there's like people want to know, for example, how many peaker plants there are in the state, I can get that pretty quickly. If people want to know what are some of the other companies doing that really sort of are doing, stationary battery storage type stuff, or who's doing the bidirectional electric vehicles, all that stuff, I can come up with that pretty easily. Um, Health implications. So it gets back to the fossil gas, and it's two things, right? It's the global greenhouse gas problem where we have these extreme episodes of heat, wildfire smoke, floods, droughts, you name it, like all kinds of issues coming up. And those all certainly, absolutely impact health. So that's the longer term issue we're trying to address here, which is the climate crisis. It's a global issue, so we're only doing our small part. But California, part of the climate center's strategy is if we can get things right in California, it amplifies because we're the fourth largest economy on the planet, right? So what we do here, a lot of the eyes around the rest of the countries, a lot of states look to California to see what we're doing. A lot of nations around the world look to California to see what we're doing. So if we can get it right here, it can be really be amplified. So that's why it's important to work on get the climate stuff right here. And then the other thing that I call nose level issues around pollution is where it really gets more to health, which is indoor air quality. And we're asking people, virtual power plants do not work with like gas appliances or gas run systems. They work with electricity. So, and Ashley and I talked about that when we had a pre-meeting and had some discussion around that. Um, and so we're asking people to more and more, and there are, municipalities and whatnot that are requiring, when you switch out an appliance to switch in a heat pump, a water heater, or HVAC system. So two places. One is indoor air quality, getting away from gas combustion, and so gas cooking systems, and so replacing those with cooking induction cooking. If you've never experimented with induction cooking, it's wonderful, and a lot of the community choice agencies now have like loaner induction cooktops that you can borrow and try out. Up here in Sonoma County, Sonoma Clean Power actually has a mock-up kitchen where they do demonstrations and such. Um, or if you find a neighbor that that has an induction cooktop. Anyway, they're great. And the professional, like sort of restaurateurs and cooks and chefs are starting to really realize the value of them as well. There was a lot of initial pushback on them, but people are realizing that the precision uh, and everything is really good with those. So it's the indoor air quality. Also, those peaker plants, guess where they tend to be located? Yep, near EJ communities, near lower income communities, communities of color. So if we can start shutting those down, that's the key thing. I mean, you could be slapping solar panels on rooftops till the cows come home, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're shutting down peaker plants. But so we need to continue putting solar up, but we need to do all these other things, including virtual power plants, to be able to start saying, look, we just don't need these things anymore. We need to obviate the need for the gas plants, and that, we're getting to a point where that could happen. Okay, next slide. Challenges. So the rules, it's the technologies are ahead of the rules. So these things have been possible actually for quite a while now. And so the rules at, say, the California Public Utilities Commission are antiquated. In California, we have a crazy quilt of utilities, investor-owned utilities, which are the big there's three: Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. Those are what are called investor-owned utilities. POUs are publicly owned utilities. That's like Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, known as SMUD, and then there's a whole bunch. There's about 40 of them around the state. Much smaller ones. We have one up here in Sonoma County. Healdsburg has their own publicly owned utility. And those are just owned and operated by the governmental entity, right? CCAs are sort of a hybrid. They are governmental agencies, but they operate within the investor-owned utilities, and they only manage a certain portion of the electricity system, which is the generation. They don't control or operate or maintain the poles and the wires. Pacific Gas and Electric, in our case, continues to do that, or SoCal Edison for the CCAs in Southern California. And so, yeah, it's a crazy quilt. So that's a challenge because for deploying, something like VPPs, because um, the rules are different, the situations are different in each service territory. And so that's why I have where you live matters. Depending on what you might want to do what you can participate in. You'd first have to, you know, look at your address and then, okay, am I in a community choice aggregation service territory? And can I talk to my CCA about what the options are for getting involved in community solar or finding an inductive cooktop, or are you doing a virtual power plant? All those kinds of things. Or are you in investor-owned utility, but there's no CCA? If you're in a publicly owned utility like SMUD or LADWP, uh, that's a public agency already fully, so there are no CCAs. Community choice agencies do not operate within publicly owned utilities, so there's no CCAs, say, for example, in SMUD or LADWP. Those are some of the challenges. I mean, costs and learning curve and um, the social political dynamics. Those are the challenges. The challenges are not really so much with the technology. The technology is pretty much there. If you get into a meeting with some of the folks that do the technical stuff, yes, there are some challenges, but they're not deal breakers. It's stuff that's worked. The technology's been demonstrated. So anyway, that's the main thing I wanted to say about challenges. So next slide.
Would it be okay, Woody, to take maybe a question or two if there is
Sure,
one? I don't know if there is.
sure.
Does anybody want to pipe in with any questions so far? Because this is, really new for a lot of people. So
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, a lot of stuff coming at you fast.
yeah, everybody good? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll move forward. But do, put your questions in the chat and we
Yeah,
we want to
sure.
bring
I'm
them
I'm happy with taking questions anytime.
in. Okay, thank you.
What's our next slide? Oh, so the legislation, yeah, and this just made it out of the assembly on Monday, so that's late breaking news. Happy to report. The Climate Center is sponsoring Assembly Bill 740 by John Harabedian. He's a new member. And this bill requires the California Energy Commission, that's CEC there, to study and create a strategy to better understand virtual power plants, how they can, what their impact would be on the grid, and to develop a framework for their implementation. A big part of this, I'm not sure I have a slide on it, but a big part of it is around estimates from some think tanks around cost savings that you could accrue from virtual power plants. Why? Because remember, once again, we're talking about using something that's already there, applying that computer communications technology to network among existing resources is far less expensive than building a new power plant or building big transmission lines, right? So there's estimates up to like, uh, uh, you know, many, many billions of dollars in savings for the customers, for the ratepayers, for Californians. Um, and the definition in the bill, we've already talked about the definition, but the formal definition in the bill is active coordination and aggregation of customer side of the meter, which means, okay, so you have a meter at your house, and what we're talking about are resources that are on your side. So it's your uh, smart thermostat, or it's your HVAC system, it's your EV that's plugged in that has bidirectional charging. So it's on your side of the meter, not the utility side of the meter. Um, Distributed energy resources, including, but not limited to, all those things I was just talking about, all those kinds of resources. And so, yeah, next slide. A related bill, Ashley asked me to talk about this. I think that this is an important bill too. Right now, this is also, could include this as a challenge, and it's sort of one of those rules that hasn't caught up with things, challenge to implementing, which is that the big utilities right now, and those are really the ones that matter because it's most of the state that are in big utility service territories, they do not get a profit from kilowatt hours of electricity sold. They have an arrangement where they are compensated for at a guaranteed rate of return. It's around 10, 11%. guaranteed rate of return for expenses they incur to build infrastructure. So they are genetically inclined to want to just build stuff, meaning mostly transmission lines, transmission and distribution infrastructure, substations, all that kind of stuff. They don't actually do a lot of generation anymore, so building power plants, but they do definitely want to build transmission infrastructure and all that kind of thing. And that costs billions and billions of dollars. It has ecological impacts because it's usually going through, forests. A lot of it goes through green space. And it also, as we have learned, risks sparking wildfires where it's going through, wildlands. Um, so yeah, that's how they make their profit from just building stuff. A former utility insider described the rate of return system as a wealth transfer engine that inflates costs for ratepayers by hundreds of billions of dollars. So SB 332 by Aisha Wahab will hold them accountable by initiating a study to examine the costs and benefits of transforming them from profit-seeking entities that serve the needs and priorities of shareholders to not-for-profit entities that center the needs and priorities of the people of California. I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see it. I'm a strong believer in publicly owned power systems. They're across the board. According to the American Public Power Association, they're about 20% lower rates than investor-owned utilities, or the for-profit utilities. Okay, next slide.
Did you just say the rates are 20% lower with public utilities?
Yep.
Um, that's amazing. And I guess, does anybody have any questions about this bill, which CHN Action Fund is also uh supporting?
And the sponsor is an organization called Reclaim Our Power. If folks are familiar with ROP, Reclaim Our Power. So yeah, and so they're
Yeah,
one
so
of the
we'll have ways
sponsors.
to get involved if you are interested in this. One question, Woody, have you ever heard of a investor-owned utility being converted to a publicly owned utility for electricity?
Um, Not in California, and the state of California has sort of in the wings. It does have a um, uh, something called Golden State Energy, which is a sort of backup plan for if and when there's ever a need to sort of take over or to form a public entity to manage the system. It's there. So, um, I've never been involved in or seen that kind of conversion take place, but it's theoretically doable, possible.
Yeah, interesting. We'll go to Bill's question and then Wendy's and then Ray's.
I had more of a comment than a question. So I'm in the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which is a publicly owned utility, and had the impression previously that they had been looking at what was best for their customers. They've been very proactive in transitioning to clean energy, but even they fought against the decentralized solar panel and lobbied in favor of decreasing the rebates that go back to the homeowners. So I'm not sure that 332 will be a panacea because even publicly owned utilities seem to have this desire to want to maintain their centralized control and monopoly. I'm curious why that is.
It's a good point, and you're absolutely right. It's definitely not a be all end all solution. There are pitfalls. I've often said, and this came up quite frequently with the community choice aggregation, formation, which is that the the value, the benefits of community choice or of municipalization, going public with these systems, it hinges on, it's dependent upon good governance, right? Good faith cities and counties taking up CCA or SMUD. A lot of what we see, especially with the older publicly owned utilities, is some entrenched thinking, old school thinking that's in their DNA at this point. They didn't come up in the time of the climate crisis. They were formed many, many decades ago. I think SMUD in the 40s. Anyway, so they do suffer from some antiquated thinking, and some of these technologies like solar present the same kind of sort of sometimes technical challenges or business model challenge, if you will, to the publicly owned utilities as they do to the investor owned utilities. And I'll get back to the thing about rules. The rules need to change, the thinking needs to change, the technologies are, you've got a better system in solar and other newer technologies, and so to take full advantage of them, in the case of solar, the ability to scale it down to the rooftop level. These are things that present challenges for a grid manager or a utility, uh, but they present benefits that can accrue to the customers and to the system in general. So you're right. It's true that they have been obstructive and haven't been as good as they could be. Um, but so it's an ongoing challenge. I just agree with you that it's not perfect, and it's ongoing challenge to get some of the old school thinking updated. We could go to the next slide, and
I
I
think
could
if
take
you could,
questions too.
yeah, that'd be great. If so Wendy was asking about the support for 332, and then I see Carol put in the chat that it passed 25, I would assume yeses, 10 no's, and then 5 abstains. Do you think that's right, Carol? I would assume that. So
Yes, that's
some
correct.
support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving forward. Thank you for sharing that, Carol. And then Ray asked, are these not-for-profit alternatives similar to an electric co-op? Could you speak to that, Woody?
Sure. I mean, there are other things like rural cooperatives that are also a publicly owned entity. So there are special districts. Um, there's also some odd ducts that have what's called direct access. So there's several different, and that's mostly for industrial customers. Um, so there are, a number of other cooperative type structures and rural cooperatives, but they're much smaller. So they're less relevant to most, sort of audiences because very few people live, say, in a rural electric cooperative or anything like that. We largely talk about, these big utilities because that's where most of the population centers are in a investor-owned utility or a POU like SMUD or LADWP.
We're getting down with the lingos here. A POU, public owned utility. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you. Here we go.
And I mean, I would just say, that 332 and 740 need all the help they can get. Now 740 is going over to the Senate side. I think 332 hopefully will be going over to the Assembly side. And I think this was your slide. Did you want to take this one, or did you want me to speak to this?
Yeah, I could. I think, a lot of us are still trying to figure out how the California legislature works. So Woody, please correct me. But
Well, yeah. So the 740 was introduced in the Assembly, so that's called the House of Origin. And it goes through a committee process where it goes to relevant committees, the Energy Committee in that case, and whatever other committees it's required to go through, and then it goes to the Assembly floor. If it's a fiscal bill, it goes to this thing called the Appropriations Committee, where a lot of bills can die. But 740 made it through, and it got through on Monday through the assembly. So it is now goes over to the Senate side for the similar process of committee hearings. And I see your little cursor there, about follow with bouncing ball. And so it'll go through, probably go to the Senate Energy Committee. Um, and Same process, eventually get to the Senate floor, which means the full Senate for a vote. And then if there were any changes made in the second house that it goes to, it goes back to the original house to incorporate those, approve or disapprove of those amendments. And then, assuming that that all gets uh, accomplished, it then goes over to the governor for his signature. Um, yeah, I mean, so that's the process in a nutshell. Obviously, there's tons and tons of minutia and other details, but in the broad stroke, that's pretty much what it's all about.
Yeah.
Um,
Woody, was there, so what's the estimated cost of AB 740? The
I think
study.
oh gosh, I don't have that at the top of
Okay.
my, yeah, I don't know. If you do want
Yeah.
me to, I I'm pretty sure it went to appropriation, so I'm pretty sure that they did have an estimated cost of it. So
Yeah.
I could dig that up if you want, if you want.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Here we are to the action section.
Yes, sure. I mean, and this is just really, I think in both cases, really for any bill that you come across that you decide, yes, I support this bill or I oppose this bill, it's as simple as that. I mean, you can add talking points, and we've got tons and tons of talking points. I didn't include them here, but I think in the link that I included to 740 on the slide that has 740, that's our page, and I think that does have more information if you want to use that. And this link that I put in here is to, if you want to find out who your state senator, assembly representative is, you just click on that, put in your address, and handy dandy link for that. And right, it's just saying, hey, please, when it comes to you for a vote, please vote yes for AB 740 or SB 332 or whatever other bill
Mm-hmm.
you want to advocate. And they do count. I've worked vis-a-vis the legislature for several decades, and I've worked like four reps. They count, they pay attention, and it matters. Um, so yeah, if don't listen to people who say, "Oh, it doesn't matter if you make a phone call or send an email or whatever." Do it because they will, or they pay attention.
Yeah, so we this is the action part of the action hour. So we were hoping that we could all take, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to use the link that I just dropped in the chat if you don't already know to find your rep. And then this is a very bare bones but sufficient script to just say, my name is Ashley McClure. I'm a physician organizer. I'm calling to ask Senator Argeen is mine. And it'd be great if everybody could put their senators in just so we can see who we're touching. So I'll put mine and then just ask them for support. And I think, I mean, do whatever feels right to you, but I'm going to ask for support for both, just to, get those numbers up that Woody was talking about. So let's go ahead and we'll literally take 2 minutes to call our reps right now, our state senators. Does anybody have any questions at all?
What I am going to do, Ashley, I am going to drop into the how come my chat's not, oh, there it is. I'm going to drop into the chat the climate centers. Right there is the Climate Center's bill tracker entry for 740, and that bill tracker entry includes the take action page. That's probably I should have included that here. I'm pretty sure that's the same link I used for that slide that's about AB 740. This has a thing. All you need to do is fill in your information, so that'll make it easy for you. Um, and just you still probably need to. Actually, no, I think you don't even need to use the find your rep thing because I think it automatically knows.
For us. So that would be an easy way to send an
Yes,
email. Yeah, yeah,
yes, that's what you
yeah.
do. And you just click submit at the bottom.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and we're gonna take 2 minutes to, if you want to use the link that Woody dropped in the chat and or make a call, and then we'll come back together at 12:48. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Is there a place on that link where I can find my senator?
The find your senator would be the find your rep link uh, that she put up there. Let's see. I'll drop that one into the chat too. I mean, I think that the one I dropped in there about from the climate center, that's the find your rep thing to find your senator or assembly person. I just dropped into the chat. The climate center's bill tracker entry page automatically knows because you put your address and stuff in there, so it automatically knows where to send. Yeah, street address, postal code.
Got it, thanks.
No problem.
Alrighty. So hopefully everybody will join back when they're ready, but we like to jump in. So thank you, Woody, for facilitating that. And I, like you said, I do think it matters, and this is good. So let's go ahead and move forward. Did that. Yeah. Do you want to speak to the resources, Woody?
These are just some resources I put here. Let's see. Yeah, I mean the 740 info page, I'm pretty sure is the one that I just dropped in the chat. There was a news release when it made it out of the assembly that has some information that I thought was kind of good. I've included the Climate Center's Grid for the Future vision paper. It's not only about virtual power plants, it's about what we call distributed energy resources, microgrids, virtual power plants, bidirectional EVs. It's about that broad decentralization movement that's underway that helps with so many things like equity and environmental justice, health, resilience. It's just a much better way for the future. And so that is outlined in this Grid for the Future paper that was put out last fall. And then related to that is a webinar that we produced about the Grid for the Future, specifically about VPPs and some of the research I was doing for this. I found a couple of articles that I thought were really good. One was a utility dive article about the cost savings, affordability issue around virtual power plants. And then NREL is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And they put out a paper around, how um, VPPs help get us toward more energy justice, democratization, first and foremost, where we can reduce the impacts, eliminate hopefully the impacts of fossil fuel plants on frontline communities by not, by starting to shut them down, but also opening up opportunities for lower income folks and communities of color to participate and to be able to afford some of these new whiz bang technologies that have been very expensive, but that are coming down in cost rapidly. Solar and batteries and EVs and everything, they're coming down in cost. So, looking at ways to have everyone be able to benefit from these new systems. So yeah, those are some of the resources there. And like I
Thank you
said
so much.
earlier, if there's other stuff people are interested in, I'm happy to follow up.
Awesome. That is a rich page of ways to get more educated. So thank you. Wonderful. So we have about, yeah, 5-ish minutes if we have questions for Woody while he's with us to share his expertise. That would be great. And then we'll wrap up with some opportunities for working specifically with Climate Health Now too. Yeah, Ray, go ahead.
Okay, virtual power plants sound like a pretty good idea overall, but my concern is that we need to get the clean energy adequate to meet our needs to start with, to be able to move it around with virtual power plants. And California is currently still importing a lot of electricity generated from coal. And that's part of the problem.
Well, it's a very, very minuscule proportion, like something on the order of power imported via coal is something in the low single digit, like 1-ish% of California's power mix. If you were in a community choice, like remember the one slide that said it matters where you live. I mean, I actually my electricity dollar goes to what's called evergreen product, and it's actually real world 100% 24/7 uh, uh, renewable California renewable portfolio standard, very low GHG emission power, and that's because we have happen to have the Geysers geothermal facility near us here, and we're under Sonoma Clean Power. So because I've got this ability to pay into that, that's sort of the accounting for my electricity use, in addition to our home solar system. So the money that does go to Sonoma Clean Power and to PG&E is 100% clean energy. It's true that we need to continue to improve our uh, grid. However, the grid is probably the bright spot on California's efforts for greenhouse gas reductions. We have made enormous progress in reducing um, reducing fossil fuel use on the grid. Natural gas is what still makes up a huge component of electricity generation in California. Not so much coal.
Yeah, I
Um,
understand coal's not a big part, but natural gas is really pretty bad too,
Natural
because there's
gas is
lots of
big.
leakage between, the well and when it's burned, and when it burns, it gives off CO2. And, the leakage is methane basically, which is very powerful greenhouse gas. So
That's right.
yeah, it's,
That's right. No, you're absolutely right.
yeah, it's rough.
Yep. That's why the push is to get away from the gas appliances and the gas systems and go to electric. And that's how you also enable the ability to uh, coordinate all those in a network and have a virtual power plant. Right now, what's being curtailed? What's being curtailed is solar. When it's easier to curtail solar power than it is to curtail gas or certainly nuclear. So they don't ramp down nuclear. That's dangerous. And they don't ramp down gas. I think there are some clandestine reasons why they don't do that. But they do curtail solar, and curtail means not use it and not use it for any useful purpose. They just uh, run it into toasters that are out by Folsom, out by the California Independent System Operator. So we need to start curtailing fossil fuel, not curtailing solar power.
That
How much,
is
how much heat
unbelievable.
energy does curtailing solar put into the environment then?
What's that?
How much heat energy does curtailing solar put into the environment when they're putting that electricity into what you call toasters?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. Maybe one more question before we head towards closing. I brought that question up though, Ray, when Woody and I were prepping and talking about this, is that, that question of like, where do the energy sources for California's grid come from? And like that there's an answer, but then there's also like layers to the answer based on like what he said, where we live and who we're buying our electricity from and time of day. So yeah, it's always more complicated, right?
Each one of those entities we talked about earlier, the SMUDs, the LADWP, the publicly owned utilities, the investor-owned utilities, they all have their own procurement. It's called procurement offices, and they all have their own. You can look on their websites, and they have their own power mix. I see Wendy's hand up, if I can.
Yeah, please.
I was curious about for those of us who are fortunate enough to own a home, and say already have solar but not battery, like what approach would you suggest to be like VPP ready? Like, get your batteries now or wait and kind of like see what's going to be the best system, like how to strategize.
I mean, I think it's more along the line you're saying for an apartment dweller.
Um, well,
Were you
I
saying
was thinking
somebody?
more homes, yeah.
So, oh, somebody that, yeah. No, I mean, I think the first and foremost is to look at, over time, when you're ready to get a new water heater, put in an electric heat pump water heater, not an old gas water heater. Same thing for any appliance. It's electrification is the thing, and you want to hit that day where you're able to detach your gas line from your house because you've gone completely electric, and then you're sort of VPP ready, right? And a smart thermostat included so that your whole system can sort of, your HVAC system can tie into that.
What
I think
about
that's
battery backup for solar?
that again, that's a decision that's each person. Certainly, that's a probably the biggest, that along with say the EV in your garage are the biggest resources that a virtual power plant operator would look at. So if you're ready to do that for other reasons, it's also something that would help you be ready for VPP. I wouldn't go ahead and make a decision and do something because you want to be ready for VPPs. I think you would make those decisions for other reasons that make sense for you.
Mm. The climate center blew my mind a couple years ago when you all were running the bidirectional charging bill, that you could buy a Tesla. Well, if you were still buying Tesla, all the politics of that aside, but if you had a home battery that your, hopefully solar panels could hook up to, you can kind of do the same thing by just buying a bidirectional EV that serves that purpose of storing, right? Is that right?
And the battery packs in EVs are many, many times the size of, say, a Tesla Powerwall in your garage. So there's a lot more electrical capacity in those. So it's really the thing that makes the more sense to utilize in that context.
Exactly. So this is just the beginning. We're all going to continue this conversation, hopefully for years ahead, making progress despite all the challenges. But a huge round of applause to Woody. Thank you so much for being a mentor. And also Barry Vesser, who works with Woody at the Climate Center, is on Climate Health Now Action Fund's advocacy advisory team. So they help us to see, where the voices of health professionals can be useful in helping, trying to work in coalition to catalyze climate solutions in the interest of health. So thank you, Woody. And this is the part where we pass the hat. We're trying to get better at just saying, this is a community effort, and we really appreciate any support, lots of support we have in terms of people volunteering their precious time, and we also really appreciate financial support. So if that's something you can and want to do, we would really appreciate it. And then we'll finish out really quickly right now with 3 upcoming opportunities and like ways to plug in more. So the first one, thank you, Amanda, for putting the links in the chat. So if you want to get involved with Climate Health Now's advocacy campaigns, we would love that. And we have an advocacy interest form, which will clue our fantastic advocacy team members, team co-leads, to reach out to you to, help bring you into the work that we're doing, which includes the virtual power plant bill. So that's one thing. If you want to fill that out in the chat, that would be great. Bye. Thank you, Woody. The next opportunity is actually tonight. So if you want to spend your whole day with Climate Health Now Action Fund, we would welcome that, because tonight our polluter accountability team is meeting from 5 to 6 on Zoom. So if you want to join us, you would be welcome to, and the registration link is going to be in the chat, or is in the chat. There it is. So that's another way to plug in. We would like you to join. And then lastly, this is just getting announced, but everybody knows I'm a real groupie of Marshall Gans, community organizing, and Climate Health Now is working with a nonprofit called People Power Health and Stanford University to offer a 6-session, but it's like an every other week kind of curriculum structure, virtual training from September 10th to November 19th that will teach us about how to tell our story of why we care about climate change in what we call public narrative, in a way to engage more people joining us in the work. So the fancy title is Using Strategic Storytelling to Advocate for Climate Health Solutions. And this is going to offer CME and continuing nursing education credits, and I think like continuing, health professional credits. So that hopefully opens it up to, if somebody has like funds for professional development through your employer, then you could probably apply that, because it'll give those continuing education credits. So that's coming down the pike in the fall. If you want to go deeper on kind of how to tell your story as a leadership practice, we would really love you to join. So share that with everybody. It's for anybody in the health field. We're just starting the registration. So that was a lot. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us, and we really hope to see you in many venues soon. Thank you, everybody. Doo, doo, doo.